Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our special Samsung Galaxy S4 podcast. I'm Phil Nickinson, the editor of AndroidCentral.com. You all know Alex Dobie. We're doing things a little differently for a number of reasons, but it's actually going to be really cool. So when last we saw the Galaxy S4, it was here in New York at Radio City Music Hall. I was here. We had a couple of us.
We had Andrew Baca, we had Rene Ritchie.
Yeah, we had Martin, who's behind the camera here, was with us as well. So Samsung had a really big event. We had a great time with it, and now we've had some really more intimate, in-depth time. And for that, we actually brought Alex all the way over from the UK to run this show. So, Alex, I'm going to let you walk me through the Galaxy S4 since you've been using it kind of nonstop for the last week.
Yeah, it's been pretty much my daily driver since I first got it. And I think if you want to start off understanding the Galaxy S4, you have to put it next to the Galaxy S3.
It's a boring phone, right? I'm not supposed to like it. Everyone said it's not a big enough change from the S3.
I wouldn't say it's a boring phone.
Yeah.
I would say compared to the vastly different hardware and the fact that manufacturers are really upping their game, I wouldn't necessarily describe it as an exciting phone. But it ticks an awful lot of boxes feature-wise and design-wise, and it's a measured sort of evolution of this design language that we first saw in the S3.
The move from the S1, and I've been in New York at every one of these launches, and it feels like so long ago. The S1 was kind of, it was the beginning by definition. The S2 was the next step. The S3 was a bigger leap.
But they reinvented the design language of the hardware and the software, and it's all designed by nature. And they've kind of lost a bit of that now because it is a little bit more angular. Nature influences aren't as prevalent as they were before.
It's almost exactly the same size. It's not the same feel. It
is the same size. I mean, you hold them at any angle, they're effectively, the profile's identical, but you get a bigger screen, of course, on the S4.
Talk to me about, let's go over the hardware a little bit.
Sure.
It's still plastic. I know people have a hard time, especially when you look at it next to HTC's new baby, which is a solid piece of aluminum.
Yeah.
It feels grossly different. And there are kind of these two camps. Either you like plastic or you can put up with it, or you like aluminum. And
I can deal with plastic. I mean, but there's no getting around the fact that it just feels inferior to the HTC One when you're holding it in your hand. The trade-off is, of course, it is very, very light. Picking it up for the first time, it's actually lighter than the Galaxy S3. It's, I think, a little bit thinner as well, though you do have a camera bulge. So they've gone for thin and light. I think they were talking about high-performance cars, high-performance this and that. It's lighter.
I think something's throwing me off, and partially because we're looking at a whole bunch of different phones right now. But when I see this phone and I see this chrome bezel, I know it's a Samsung phone, but I almost expect this to be metal now. Just with as high-end as all the other phones have been.
I think the materials have taken a bit of a step forward. The lines are a little bit cleaner. I think the joins are a little bit closer together. We were looking at this before. I think the buttons are actually metal now. They feel metal. They have a different sound to them. They've got kind of chamfers around the outside that you can see. The build quality is a step up from the S3, but it's very much an incremental upgrade in every sense on that device. The hardware is externally pretty much the same. The software hasn't taken huge leaps forward. It's pretty much the same old TouchWiz with some visual tweaks and a hell of a lot more features.
Buttons are all in the same spot where we're used to them in a Samsung phone.
Yeah, you've still got a menu button there for better or worse. You've got a big clicky home key, long press for task switching and long press, and you've got Google Now up there.
So Google Now is actually a software button. There's no one-step way to bring it up?
You can long press the menu key to bring up the search bar, but that's kind of different to what you would get.
Okay.
You don't get the Google bar at the top. You just get your search suggestions, and then it has stuff below that.
Let's walk through some of the raw specs of the Galaxy S4.
Yeah, I mean it's very similar to the HTC One hardware-wise. So actually, there are two different versions of it. So,
let's start. Larger display, 5-inch display, right?
Sure. 5-inch display, 1080p, Super AMOLED, Full HD Super AMOLED.
Super AMOLED sucks. That's what the kids are telling me.
It doesn't. I mean, to me, what bothers me about the screen isn't necessarily the fact that it's Super AMOLED. The trade-offs are all there with. Daylight performance isn't quite as good as an LCD.
I mean, sitting here in this room, it looks really nice. Like indoors,
the reason it looks really nice is because I've got the brightness.
Oh, do you?
You stick it on auto, that's what it looks like.
Okay, so
it's noticeably duller on auto.
That's not bad, but
I think that it has the same problem that the S3 had when it was first released, in that the auto brightness doesn't ramp up anywhere near enough, especially indoors.
But it does have a separate auto brightness for within applications, right? Isn't that part of the big software suite?
I'll actually have to check that. I know the browser used to have a separate brightness setting, and there is, which actually I think is probably what you're talking about. Under display, you have all kinds of screen modes, and there's adapt display.
And that's actually a pretty big bullet point that they're touting in the S4. The S4 is full of feature bullet points.
It almost, I mean, for me, this almost has too many features, and you could argue that extra functionality is never a bad thing, but when you have so many of them, it's almost really difficult to put it onto a phone in such a way that makes sense and that users can discover it. So, I mean, case in point, you pull the notification thing down, press the button, those are your quick settings.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15. We have 19 quick settings here, which is a lot.
Yeah, and you can
of
course,
customize
that itself
that,
is customizable.
Yes.
So,
but still, that's a lot to have in one place for any.
Yeah, and the argument to that, the counterweight to that, if you like, that Samsung was talking about at our briefing for this was that there is a kind of a revamped easy mode. There's a home screen mode, which I think on the S3 just controlled the way the launcher worked. In the S4, it hooks into other apps as well, so the calendar is a little bit simpler if you turn on easy mode. And it's really designed for the kind of smartphone users that would be overwhelmed by all these features. I mean, I'm still discovering new features on this, even after a few days.
There's been a lot of talk. There are actually 2 versions of this phone, although right now there's kind of only one.
There's one that's out. There's this is a Snapdragon 600, 1.9 gigahertz, which is...
it's quad-core, and people are getting hung up again on how many cores these processors have, I think.
Yeah, so this is quad-core. The Exynos version is... They call it an octa-core. Basically, it's 4 plus 4. So it switches between 4 A15 cores and 4 A7 cores, and it can't use both at the same time. So for low-power stuff, or when the screen's off, it uses the A7.
So it's 8 cores, but you're never using all 8 at once. And they're actually...
No, there are some implementations of the... It's called Big Little. There are some Big Little implementations that will use all 8 concurrently, but Samsung's doesn't right now. So effectively, both are quad-core. I mean, you can make the argument that software has much more of an impact on performance than hardware does. And actually comparing it to the HTC One, that's something that you notice. Samsung is still doing things, I think, in the old-fashioned Android way, where the UI can kind of fall victim to tasks that are running in the background. It can slow things down slightly, whereas HTC, I think, is this time around, especially in Sense 5, has put more emphasis on having things... like an instant response when you touch it and having apps loading instantly. So I think the hardware inside is the same. They're probably just as fast at gaming and that kind of thing, but responsiveness probably a little bit quicker on the HTC One.
Another big selling point for the Galaxy S4 for Samsung are all these little just software. I almost hate to call them gimmicks, but they're gimmicks. Being able to activate the screen by floating your finger over it.
And I'm not sure if we can show this up close on camera, but the way the lock screen, I mean, there are a few different lock screen effects you can choose. Of course, everything is an option on this phone. But if you power it on before you actually touch the screen, you have this little light thing that follows your finger around, and then when you unlock,
why?
It's just
it's like Tinkerbell flying around, but I don't need that.
You swipe down, and that turns it on. Same in the Gallery app. The Gallery app takes a while to load. There's some pictures we took at Grand Central Station earlier today. And with galleries, you can kind of hover over. You get some haptic feedback when you do that. So hover over, and the usefulness of that is kind of debatable. I would consider it a gimmick.
It works in the browser as well.
The browser has that. I mean,
it works in the stock email client, but not Gmail.
Yeah, I mean, this is another thing worth noting. It works in the Samsung apps, not necessarily the third-party apps. Same thing for you can gesture things away and flip through pictures. So instead of using your finger to actually touch the screen, you just wave in front of it. I believe it uses a front-facing camera, so that kind of thing. I mean, that's the kind of the use case they suggested is if your hands are wet or something, or you're in the kitchen, you don't want to necessarily touch the screen.
But at the same time, you've picked up your phone with wet or dirty hands.
Maybe you've got a stand. I don't know. You kind of swipe over, not necessarily over the phone, over the Samsung logo and that.
And it doesn't take a whole lot of getting used to. It takes a little bit, but...
I mean, how much are you going to use that in day-to-day use? I'm not sure. If the Samsung apps are a big part of how you use a smartphone, then that's probably going to be pretty useful for you. I think we're all tied in very much to the Gmail app for Gmail, for Chrome for the browser, so that's not maybe something that we'd...
Let's talk about the camera. Camera is, for me, probably one of the most important parts of any phone at this point, especially I have kids. I'm always taking pictures of my kids. Samsung's always had really good cameras, I thought. Really from the Galaxy S2 on up. If I had to be testing another phone, I would always make sure I had one of the Samsung phones in my other pocket so that I could take good pictures. Is that the case with the S4? Am I going to be disappointed at all?
Samsung's never really made a big fuss about the way they do, that the actual hardware inside their camera. We've heard HTC talks about ultra pixels and all that stuff. Samsung has always just said, look, okay, here's our camera, it's X megapixels. And it's always turned out to be pretty good. It's 13 megapixels.
13? Okay.
So I think it takes decent pictures. We've got a few on here. I think compared to the HTC One, because that's what a lot of people want to compare to, because it has different optics, you're looking at probably a little bit more versatile of a camera. You've got potential to capture more detail in daylight because it's 13 megapixels versus 4. Low light, predictably, not quite as good as the HTC One, but on the whole, I think it's very, very close. It's tough to make any tough to make a judgment, but probably the S4 pulls ahead just a little bit in general use for most people.
Samsung's got a bunch of features in the camera app as well. Some of them actually, I didn't bring it in here with me, LG has actually gotten out first on its Optimus G Pro, at least the Korean version. I got an update on it last week. The dual picture mode, so you can simultaneously shoot with the front and rear cameras. You have, I forget the name of it, but if somebody is, say my kids are playing soccer, it will shoot 20 pictures or whatever and then stitch them all into a single image, so you see my kid 20 times running, and it looks really cool.
There's an animated photo mode which you can essentially use a GIF making tool, so you may animate little animations that you can then share. Does
that affect the normal everyday use of the camera? When if I'm just walking down the street and I take a picture of something, is all this other stuff going to be in the way?
No, all this other stuff generally, we've got this Galaxy camera style click wheel thing. And
I like that, actually.
It's really good,
They borrowed a lot of the features that have been on the surprisingly popular Galaxy camera and brought them to the phone. That's important, and that's going to be, I would expect to see that on probably every upcoming
pretty much. That's just part of their Android camera app now. So if you want to use any of the special settings, that's just a wheel you can use to select it. We've got animated photo there.
That was one of my complaints with the HTC One, is all these settings are kind of hard to get to.
Everything is just a list on the HTC One. It's really frustrating sometimes. HDR mode has been improved quite a lot, I think. We've used that a little bit this week. Eraser Show, which sounds a lot more ominous than it basically lets you, same thing as the HTC One, there's a mode that lets you...
If somebody photobombs your picture, Eraser mode can get rid of them.
Can get rid of them. What else? Panorama mode, actually really good on this. We've seen some before. Vastly improved compared to the S3, so it's nice to see that. It's really about the software features more than the actual hardware, and the hardware's good, but they're not making a big deal out of that. It's all these neat little gimmicks that they've got plugged in.
We talked about the size. I wanted you to put it up next to the Galaxy Note 2 just so you can see. It's not a small phone, but it's not as big as the Galaxy Note 2. I would assume the Galaxy Note 3, if there is one, is going to be about the same size, just a lot like what they did with the Galaxy S4, larger screen and kind of the same footprint.
Yeah. And comparing this to the size of other phones, remember, it is essentially just the same size as this.
Right.
The footprint is more or less identical.
If you have a Galaxy S3, it's going to look and feel... Well, it's going to feel a little different. It's going to look very much the same.
Yeah.
The footprint is... you're talking a millimeter or two difference, if I remember properly.
Yeah, the main difference in, I think, ergonomics, which is actually a positive change,
I think
the sides are flatter, which means you're not... there's no risk of picking it up and it suddenly just...
I want that chrome to be metal. It's driving me nuts.
Yeah, I think there were rumors that there was a chrome one at some point, and they go through different designs. For some reason they chose not to do that.
Right.
But, I would be very happy to see this kind of design with less plastic, and I think hopefully if Samsung sees what other manufacturers are doing with more exotic materials, maybe they'll take a bit of a different route next time.
Everybody's going to have questions about network and data. It's kind of tough for us to talk about that now, and it's a sore spot.
We've been using this on Sprint for the past week or so. And
as you know, any device on Sprint, almost anywhere that's not one of the brand new LTE areas.
And of course, New York, not an official Sprint LTE market. And LTE and EVDO is the 3G standard. Really, really variable in terms of speed. Last night I pulled 35 down and 8 up.
Right.
The rest of the time it's been probably... no more than 1 or 2 down. It's really not been great.
That makes it tough to judge battery life, at least on a real world standpoint. I mean, you're going to see reviews of people just draining the battery in almost a laboratory setting. We prefer to do more of a here's how the phone worked for me when I actually used it as God intended in Samsung.
What I would say, though, with battery life, even considering how crappy Sprint's been, where we are for the past week, I generally get a full day's use out of this.
And more important, you can take the battery out and put a new one in if you need to. And that's for a lot of people, that's a big option.
Yeah.
I totally understand if that's something you have to have.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I've been pretty impressed with battery life, just knowing how much of an effect Signal has on it. I think it's generally about the same as I've got the HTC One, so if you're using it constantly, 7 or 8 hours, you'll drain it right down to dead.
Right.
Normal use, I'm getting 14 hours easily out of it, which is more than enough for most people.
You're looking pretty trim. You must have been using the exercise apps that Samsung has built into this. Are you tracking what you're eating?
I am not tracking what I'm eating. They have S Health, which is effectively, I'm not sure what it's actually based on, which I'll have to check that, but it lets you track calories, lets you track exercise. I think it doesn't do it automatically. It certainly hasn't been doing it automatically for me. You have to put in.
It's not gonna. It's not gonna do this unless you tell it.
It doesn't track your. It doesn't track your movement in the same way that Google Now does.
Right.
Google Now tells you how much you've been walking, and often for me, it's completely wrong. But
and that's a good thing. I don't want it, following me around.
That would be just a little bit creepy.
There are accessories to go with this as well. There's a scale. There's a heart rate monitor.
Yeah, and actually, I think Samsung was saying that some of the health specific features, it actually tracks your statistics and stuff. Some of that isn't in this because it needs FDA approval. That's not there yet, so that'll be changing a bit.
A little talked about feature that it's on the HTC One as well. It's on the Galaxy Note 8. LG's had this, I believe, as well, is the TV remote. So this thing has an IR blaster right up here.
Right up top. It's kind of difficult to see. It looks like just another one of the little sensors up top. But it works pretty well. It has essentially, it's peeled, right? It's the same as the HTC One.
The way it works is it can serve as a universal remote, but the application that comes along with it is more about discoverability. So you have this app, you fire it up, and it says, all right, here's what's on TV. You can get a normal channel list and a normal remote control look, but it says, here's what's on TV right now. Do you want to watch it? You just hit the thumbnail, and it takes you right to it. Yeah. It actually works really, really well, and I think that's kind of an understated feature of a lot of these new phones.
Kind of.
I like it.
Yeah, it's useful. It's a way of making sure you use your device more, and that's what every manufacturer wants.
As long as you've got it sitting there with you on the couch, might as well put it to good use, right?
Few interesting features if you have a 2013 Samsung Smart TV. I believe there are some more wireless mirroring options that you can do. So you can wirelessly push the display from the phone to the TV or from the TV to the phone. And that last one is pretty cool. If you're on,
I've seen it in action.
You have a fast wireless network, lets you just pull stuff straight to your phone, and that means TV wherever you are within the range of your wireless network.
I'm trying to decide still, for as big as the Samsung event announcing this thing was, and as big as we all make it, is this supposed to be that big a departure for Samsung, or is it just the next iteration of the Galaxy S? And while it's very good, have we been putting it up on too much of a pedestal? Whereas the HTC One has to be this huge hit for HTC, Samsung doesn't have to differentiate quite as much from its previous success.
No, it's a Samsung phone through and through, and that's good and that's bad. They really haven't departed from any of their previous strategy in the S3, right? So TouchWiz is still kind of a mess.
Right.
Visually, it isn't as nice designed as stock Android or as HTC Sense.
And I've been saying that forever.
Sure. So if you're hoping for a vast sort of overhaul of TouchWiz, that's not coming yet.
Nothing you can't fix with a third-party launcher or...
kind of. You've still got a million billion different apps and a settings menu which is kind of frustrating. I really don't like what they've done with the tabs here. It's kind of confusing.
Yeah.
You would think if you just had... If it was exclusive, then that would be
every other manufacturer has your normal menu drill down.
Yeah, and the weird thing for me is you have connections, you have device, you have accounts, and then there's more. So if you want to check what a setting is, first you have to check all three, and then if it's not in, then it might be in more.
Right.
It just seems like it's like something that in theory would be a good idea, but in practice just means instead of checking one menu, you've got to check 4 menus. Right. And it's just kind of frustrating. So.
Give me a score. I know we don't do scores, but I'm going to put you on the spot here. Just for you guys, we're going to make Alex give us a score.
I think
1 to 10.
1 to 10.
1 to 10.
8.
It's pretty high considering you're kind of meh.
I'm kind of meh, but at the same time, I would consider the HTC One to be a 9.
All
So I think for me, I enjoy using the HTC One more than I enjoy using this. Maybe that's just because I've used so many Samsung devices that the UX is kind of maybe a little bit old, a little bit stale. But on the other hand, I think HTC just seems to get design a little bit better than Samsung does, and that's probably nothing that Samsung can't fix eventually just by throwing money at it. But
it's not bad.
Yeah,
it's not bad.
Yeah.
All right, so there you go. Another quick walkthrough of the Samsung Galaxy S4. We're here in New York. We're having a blast. Alex, thank you very much. Thank you for flying all the way over to do this.
Well, thank you, Phil.
Thank them.
Thank you, people.
All right, we'll see y'all later.